and let me just answer away. I think that's going to be a lot easier if you're okay with that.
I'm totally okay with that. So in fact, you guys too, if you have some questions as we're going along, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll go ahead and bring up some of those questions as well. But I'm going to start with Dr. Rademaker's background because you were originally born in Holland, right, Dr. Rademaker?
Yeah, so briefly, my background, I feel very, very privileged. I was actually born in Holland when I was a year old, moved to the US. I lived up in New Jersey, lived in the US for about 6 years, moved to Mexico at the age of 6, lived there for another 8, and then migrated back to Europe again and lived between England, Spain, and Holland until I came back to the United States. Went to med school when I was 17 back in Holland and continued my training in the US at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and then Michigan, and then Minnesota, then Wisconsin, I'm sorry, and realized that after 10 years of that frightful cold, I had to go seek the warmer weather again, and so came down to Florida. So that's me in a nutshell. I've been a plastic and reconstructive surgeon for the last over 20 years, but really recognized that there was so much more than just traditional medicine. And a lot of my colleagues are really still stuck in that mindset. That's why I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have challenges with doctors and trying to explain the magic that you guys do create, because it is magic what you guys can do. As my own experience was with Lisa the first time. And so beyond that, I just help personal transformation in many different ways. And what I'm passionate about is I'm passionate about creating change, enhancing life, and developing peaceful awareness. And so, in a nutshell, all the things that I do basically relate to that. And whether it's plastic surgery, whether it's training, whether it's coaching, whether it's regenerative medicine, which I do as well. And so that's me in a brief nutshell.
And that's a great topic that you brought up that's often discussed amongst our colleagues here, Dr. Rademaker, is your approach coming from Europe and traveling the world, picking up 4 languages along the way, dialoguing with the best doctors all around you, and then you come to the United States. Was it a little bit maybe disappointing at first to see that we weren't so open then to other modalities or other forms of medicine? We were kind of like in this rut, or how did you see it from a doctor's perspective from Europe to the United States?
Well, yeah, no, that's an interesting question because from a training perspective, I believe I got the best of 2 worlds. Medical schools are far superior in Europe, only because it's traditional how it's been, and it's more like an apprenticeship, like it used to be, and so it's essentially 8 years long. So when I was 17, went through all the physics, the chemistry, all the basic sciences, and then continued forward. But what's far superior in the United States is the postgraduate training. And so, and the reason for that actually is they have to kind of catch up for that time lost in medical school, because in the US, medical school is only 4 years. So it's really not enough. Whereas in Europe, pretty much when you're done with school, you're kind of thrown out. And then
Okay.
you're supposed to know what you're supposed to do, which isn't always the case. So it's learning by fire in a sense. Whereas in the US, it's much more didactic. And so I feel that I got the best of both worlds that way. But the truth is that what I found interesting, studying in Holland, and I don't know how unique I am even with that, but alternative medicine or complementary medicine was very accepted, but still it was very much compartmentalized. So you either had patients who just strictly wanted medicine, you had patients who strictly wanted the complementary, which is kind of sort of the same situation that we have here in the United States. But what I learned from all that was I made a very, very clear decision before I left med school, was to me, it doesn't matter how we get the result. And the metaphor I like to use, look, if you just need to stand on your head to get rid of your headache, then, and if it works, then let's do it. And so that's always been my approach. So I'm not bound by the traditions of medicine, which served me well, because as soon as I started my practice, my mindset was clearly different than everybody else's. And my mindset was, how is it that it was with a question, how is it that we harness the potential of the body to restore form and function? And that's how it needs to be. Prevention, traditional medicine either deals with disease in a symptomatic fashion or deals with prevention. Even prevention isn't good enough. Prevention is just making sure you don't get a disease. What we're needing to look at is how do we optimize the function of the body? And so by looking at it from that perspective is, okay, great. What are the biomarkers? What are the things that we can address so that we can have an optimally functioning body? And with our lifestyles, it's a big challenge. Take sleep, for example. For many people, 4 hours of sleep is almost like a badge of honor because now that they're recognized as being very busy people, right? But it's really bad for you in
Yes.
so many different ways. So to really answer your question, Lisa, is it's still a challenge today that the focus is on treating the symptoms and it's not addressing the root cause, and which is great about lymphatic drainage because that is addressing one of the factors that causes disease.
Doc, you just mentioned the brain and sleep, and I pulled up recently a study that was done, National Institute of Health, I put it on our page, where they found that people required at least 1 hour of deep sleep in order for the lymphatic system in the brain to activate at night. And on a 4-hour sleep schedule, that isn't happening. And so the long-term effect is dis-ease eventually if you don't correct it. So it was really amazing that you brought that up right now in light of all this research going on in the lymph system. And then watching you in practice and working together, that was so amazing because I did see Dr. Rademaker use the best of both worlds. To see that in practice, integrating it, personalizing it to each patient, not cookie cutter, but to me, watching how he would approach, in fact, Dr. Rademaker, if you don't mind me sharing, I remember the woman with the C-section that came in and she wanted to have a surgery and you told her, no, you need to get lymphatic drainage, that's fluid. And we did MLD and it flattened out her stomach and you didn't do surgery, which just spoke to your ethics, I thought, and I know it did to hers, that she was so grateful. She didn't need to have a surgery. She didn't know what her real problem was and you went right to the heart of it. And she was the happiest camper and we were all happy for her.
Right.
So there's times when we need a knife. There's times when we don't. Dr. Bart Rademaker knows that. And Dr. Rademaker, you started out originally as a hand surgeon. Is that correct?
No, actually, as a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, our training had an emphasis on hand surgery. So when I first started, perhaps I was doing a lot of ER cases and doing a lot of hand surgeries, only because there weren't many hand surgeons in the area. So, I mean, technically, as a plastic surgeon, we do everything. I mean, it's an interesting thing that I don't think many people understand, but and I like to put it this way: is that if you ever wanted to put a doctor on the space station, then you better choose a plastic surgeon because they can do everything. We have been trained in every organ, every part of the body, and basically to correct things. And typically, we know a lot more about internal medicine than some of the internists. And so, we're trained so that we can address all sorts of problems. But yes, in the beginning, I would say my first 2 years, I was doing more reconstructive work, breast reconstructive work, and hand surgery than cosmetic. Very quickly, I started doing a lot more cosmetic.
Yeah, and it's so, just so people appreciate in hand surgery how delicate, if you can do an operation on a hand and reattach fingers like you were doing and get that function back, that's amazing. I'm like, that's a surgeon you would want to be able to do any other part of your body. If they can get fingers to move again, that's amazing.
Well,
And
when you think about it, some of the sutures that we use are 1/10 of a millimeter in width, or thickness, I should say. And so we're actually working with microscopes, and it's millimeter by millimeter. So yeah, I still can do that, which is great. I just had a case the other day, which was very complicated nose repair, or I'm sorry, face repair, and it's a very delicate process. So yeah, I feel very lucky that I can do that.
Okay, you're going to have to teach me the secret of doing those sutures with your gloves on. I watched you and I was amazed how you get the sutures perfectly with your gloves on, double gloved hands, but totally amazing. But I got a question for you, since there's so many therapists here that use their hands. I know you've seen a lot of accident injuries pertaining to jobs. Is there any advice you would give to all these massage therapists and physical occupational therapists with their hands?
In taking care of their hands, or is that what?
Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, I think, and your group of people will absolutely appreciate this. And in a lot of the work that I do, and I have my own podcast series, which is back here, back this side, a prescription for your transformation, where I actually talk about what I call the three intelligences: it's the brain, the body, and the energy intelligence. Nothing happens by random in our life, in our world today. And so if we just can tap into that intelligence, when things don't work out, we're just not being intelligent, right? And so the part that I think a lot of people miss in general is the energy. And so in essence, your hands are a tool of energy that you then use on your patients. And by considering that in that manner, I think offers tremendous protection to yourself, but more so, more importantly, how you then impact the patient that you're taking care of. And essentially what you're doing a transfer of energy with the kind of work that you're doing. Same thing what I do when I do surgery, and that's why I think I've done very well over the years, because of that conscious awareness of the energy transfer that is created with my hands. And so I've always been very mindful of my hands. I've been always very aware of my hands. And that's the same thing for you. I mean, your hands are so critically important in delivering a treatment to your patients, more so than just the physical part. If that's an answer, then I hope that helps.
It's a very good answer. And I think they appreciate it, hearing that you appreciate where we're coming from as therapists, because not everyone understands, our side of it either. That I know we try to avoid transference, as they say in medicine, but yet you can't give the best of yourself if you don't put a little bit of yourself in it. At the same
Well,
time,
it depends on what you consider as transference, insofar as when you're focused on healing, and when you're focused on the positive aspect of it, then, and also obviously getting permission, because you have to have permission to do that. But when you have that trusting relationship with your client, and depending on who they are, and how open they are, it is a very important part. And it's not something that we fully understand or can measure, but I can guarantee you, if you talk to any metaphysical enlightened practitioner, they'll agree with that.
you know, Dr. Rademaker, do you mind if we talk for a minute about your condition with your leg? Do you mind if I bring that up right now?
So I'm going to share why I was sold on Lisa. And I understood the importance of our anatomy, even though I barely studied it in medical school. We had a very interesting situation in med school, is that I was able to collect all the exams, and typically what I would do is, especially for anatomy, I would start studying at noon the day before. I try to avoid all the practices and everything else. I mean, I only went to the compulsory things, and so I hope some of my professors aren't listening right now. So, but I would gather all these exams, and I would intently for about 10 hours study all these exams. And when I do the exam, and my only interest was passing the exam, I didn't care about anything else. And so I literally would read the first 3 or 4 words and already knew the answer. I hadn't even read the full question and don't look at the answers, because we collected, my house collected all the old answers. So the point that I'm getting at is this, is that as much as I appreciate anatomy, I didn't have a full awareness of lymphatic drainage. And I wasn't paying attention when somebody came to me and said, "Oh, I got this wonderful, amazing person. She's incredible. You know, she's going to give you a lymphatic massage." And I only heard massage, didn't hear anything else. And so it was a long day, and I was very tired, and I was super excited. And here comes Lisa, and it's like, oh, okay, she's not one of those really strong people that can do this deep Swedish massage. Okay, well, she must be really good at, but she does because I trusted my employee, right? And so, so then I'm expecting this really deep massage, and then I just get this light touch, and I'm thinking, oh God, poor woman, who is this person? She really doesn't know, but she's doing it, and she really doesn't know what I want. So, so anyhow, I was really nice and polite and very complimentary and everything else, and I said, okay, you know, whatever. And then I do have a condition where it's somewhat genetic. Um, so I have the varicose veins on my left leg, not so much my right leg. And with all the standing or the sitting, then it typically swells up quite significantly. And it's bothersome. It was heavy and everything else. And the next day, it was completely gone. And I was totally blown away, totally sold on Lisa. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. Now I can incorporate this into my practice and help everybody. So, you know, it's a fun and funny story for me, you know, how we just don't know what we don't know that makes a difference. And so brought to my awareness is that we really have to have an open mind. And as practitioners, you know, I invite you to also have that open mind with your patients because they certainly don't always have that open mindedness. And how you are able to respond to that, you'll be able to deliver at a much higher level the results that you're looking for, and then get their endorsement because you're open to them and you're open to their rhythms and their vibrations and their resonance so that you can best serve them. And so it's a lot more than just that touch. And I know you guys appreciate that more than most people because you have your hands on them. And again, it's that energetic transfer that you're making. But yeah, that's my story. Did you have anything else to add to that?
It just, we're both laughing because of how fast that meeting went and what your expectation and what mine was. Because you hadn't told me yet about your leg. It wasn't until we actually turned you prone, I saw his leg was almost double the size of the other one. And I went, oh, this poor thing. He must be working so hard and he's standing on his legs and he needs relief. And you know, that intention was there. I really did feel bad for you. I said, wow, you're working on all these people and you're uncomfortable with this swollen leg. And it's just amazing that how that all worked together for good. And then we were able to implement that into the patients that we saw there. And those who had had previous surgeries would often say, I healed faster or I feel better. There was a marked difference
Right.
using the MLD. So Dr. Rademaker, you took the ball though, really from there. And you've been sharing this with all the other doctors. And by the way, guys, Dr. Rademaker won't tell you this, but he also knows how to do MLD.
Right.
He is a practitioner. He works on some of his own very high end and very private clientele that can't be shared publicly. So he has to take his own hand tools. And how do you like being the practitioner, Dr. Rademaker?
Well, my challenge is that, you know, one of the very reasons I went into surgery was it's that vibration that works very well with me. It's decisive, effective, immediate, and then we move on. And so I don't always have the patience for the gentleness of that massage because I want to get results right now. So it's yeah, a bit of a challenge at times, but then of course occasionally on the right person, that needs it, I can definitely do that. Interesting enough, I started something more recently in the field of regenerative medicine, which I thought I'd never do. In fact, I promised myself I would never do this, and that is microneedling, and microneedling of the face to
Yeah.
help regenerate the facial skin to look so much better. And it's, together with lymphatic drainage, it's just really, as I put it, harnessing the potential of the body to restore form and function. And that's what we're doing. The body has this intelligence, and when we can just stimulate it, when we can do the right things, and that's why lymphatic drainage is so key. Currently what I'm doing is I'm working on a variety of different training programs, and reviewing, one of Dale Bredeson's book on Alzheimer's, how he explores how inflammation is an integral part of this disease that's actually completely reversible for the most part. Same thing with all neurodegenerative disease. And so the lymphatic system is so integral into dealing with inflammation that, unless, we properly address things like that, people will remain sick.
Absolutely. All the research now and the funding that's coming behind it, the grant funding, the National Institute of Health got behind that because they definitely nailed it down. They said the lymphatic system is an underlying player in Alzheimer's and a lot of central nervous system diseases. In fact, you've been working, I wanted to touch on this too, with multiple sclerosis.
Right.
Do you want to share a little bit, enlighten us a little bit from where we've been in the past?
So again, that's another neurodegenerative disease. So to understand, well, let me say it this way. The best way to understand where we find ourselves today is understanding that we're actually undergoing three major paradigm shifts in how we address our health and wellness. So the first one started about 1980s, 1990s, and that's the wellness revolution. So understanding, all the different aspects of wellness so that we can optimize that. And so again, that's one of the reasons why lymphatic drainage is coming much more in the forefront, as well as all the other things out there. So following that, we're in the early stages or the infancy of regenerative medicine. So where we get access to the regenerative potential of the body, and it's much more than just stem cells, in order to address the root cause of disease and reduce the burden of disease, extend longevity, and improve quality of life. And then the next part is the biotechnology, which, most people are more focused on, the input and output devices. But when we start understanding energy from a metaphysical sense, then that's going to really dramatically change so many things. And so there's many paradigms happening right now. So I bring that up because in addressing all kinds of medical conditions, my opinion is that they're all reversible. You just have to understand how to address them. When you look at Alzheimer's as an example, the way Bredesen likes to coin it, there's 36 different aspects or factors that contribute to Alzheimer's. When you can begin to address all of them, or if most of them, you can dramatically change or reverse someone's condition in Alzheimer's. And so that's true with anything else, including MS. As much as we still don't understand, how MS is really working, as I think we do understand Alzheimer's, the whole concept is simply this: is that you have in the order of 22,000 genes. Now, when we compare our genes with the Anopheles fly, right, there's a 97% similarity. So those 22,000 genes can't explain, the difference. What happens is that you have 2 million switches. So those switches turn on and off those genes. So that's the whole study of epigenetics. When back in the 50s, they Watson and Crick figured out the DNA sequence, everybody was so gung-ho about the genomic theory, that's everything, but they missed the fact that 50% of the weight of the nucleus wasn't the DNA, was all the proteins around it that are basically interacting with the DNA and all those switches, turning them on, turning them off. So the truth is that whatever the habits of your parents and grandparents and great great parents were, they actually switched on or switched off certain genes that you then inherited, either switched on or switched off, which then created all the problems that you have today. So the idea then is, how do we reverse all that? So one thing we know about MS is inflammation. So that's where stem cells has been pretty significant in helping with that. One thing I have to be clear is that, the FDA is making it very clear that we can't make any specific claims or use testimonials. And so I like to honor the FDA. But there are studies out there, clinical studies out there that I'm beginning to collect that are indicating, how it's working and what's happening. But one part of MS is inflammation. There are studies comparing MS with Lyme's disease, and where that has improved as well. Now, Lyme's disease obviously is from the deer tick bites, and those bites have like over 70 different microorganisms that are injected into your body. The Borrelia burgdorferi is one of them, which is at the seat of Lyme's disease. And so when we can address inflammation with cell therapy, then there's a good chance that we can begin to reverse things. But the most important thing that I share with all my patients and anybody who's listening is that, well, it's great, if you can try to find this magic process, but there is no such thing, well, except for lymphatic drainage, of course. But so you have to be smart, and you have to address all the different aspects of our body. And so you have to look at the different types of vitamins. You have to look at your hormonal panels, but looking at them in the perspective that traditional doctors aren't doing. Most people, when they look at a thyroid, they look at the TSH and it's normal, but they don't look at the free T3, free T4, the reverse T3, which are different factors. They don't look at the ratio between T3 and reverse T3. And so all these different factors have an impact on how effective your metabolism or your thyroid is working. So by looking at all these different aspects, the vitamins, other micronutrients, your microbiome, I mean, just think of that for a moment. We have 70 trillion cells in the body. And does anybody know how many microorganisms we have? Anybody want to guess?
Shout it out, because I don't know.
Well, I was shocked, and really shocked. And it almost made me sick, I guess, because I was really excited about 70 trillion cells of our body. I mean, I could wrap my head around that. Now, we have 700 trillion bugs in our body. And they're all over the place. They're in your gut, they're in your skin, they're in your sinuses, their ears, whatever they are. And so it's an organism in of itself. And so, that contributes to neurodegenerative disease. I mean, herpes simplex, the oral bacteria, the gingivalis, the P. gingivalis, I forget exactly what it is beforehand, and so many other. I mean, you can have very asymptomatic infections in the brain, and then if it causes inflammation, then it's going to cause things like MS. And so yeah, lymphatic drainage is an important part to reduce that, clear things out the body, so we have a cleaner system.
Doc, talking about that, because I've had a lot of people ask about the MS population. In looking at the studies when they were using twins that lived up north, or they were separated from birth, so they had the one up north and the one down south. The ones that tended to be up north developed MS, or it was progressed more rapidly than the twin in the south, which led us to thinking about, how does the lymphatic system respond to cold and to heat? And we find that it tends to work better with the heat. And we know that with a lot of inflammatory conditions, when people come to the south, things like arthritis, and they move to the desert Southwest or what have you, a lot of the discomfort goes away when those vessels are able to dilate and remove the cellular debris.
Right.
So that's amazing. And you've actually had people that were in wheelchairs with multiple sclerosis getting up and moving again. Amazing with your work.
Yeah, I mean, it's all these neurodegenerative diseases are quite debilitating. And so when the cool thing about what we all can do together, you know, which is my focus and the work that I do is how do we tap into that collective wisdom and generate, you know, our create a space for generative collaboration so that all these different aspects will absolutely help, you know, reversing disease. And so it's not just one thing. I mean, you know, when you think about it, you know, cells respond to, or your nucleus responds to three things. It's your thoughts, it's your environmental toxins, and your internal toxins. And so um, for example, if you look at Alzheimer's, the one of the things that was originally thought of in causing Alzheimer's, was a fat accumulation in the brain called amyloid beta. And so people are thinking, well, that's the cause, right? So we have to reduce fat, we have to do this. But actually, amyloid beta is a protection system against the inflammation. So it's not the cause, it's actually protecting against the inflammation. And so that's where we need to look at all these different things, because everybody, in my opinion, should have the ability to reverse disease. You know, we don't necessarily have all the answers. Well, I know we don't. But when we address it from many different angles, and Alzheimer's is 36 different things you have to address, not one pill. You know, then it makes a difference. And so, like, for example, the work that I'm doing, and I'm inviting all of you, by the way, to check out my new website next week called mylocalwellness.com, where what I'm actually doing is creating that space where people can ask questions and connect, and where consumers can ask questions to you guys, as an example, providers and practitioners, you know, to help with their problems. Because that's the way that it's going to really make a big difference for everyone, where we all work together, doctors, nurses, practitioners, massage therapists, psychologists, you know, whoever, right? Entrepreneurs. We all work together so that people can be healthy.
Your work has been beautiful all through the years, Dr. Rademaker, and I know you've made this shift, and I wanted to focus in a little bit more on regenerative medicine because it's a buzzword going through the community, and I just want to make sure that the therapists understand what is rejuvenation medicine. How is that different than what we've had in the past?
Well, when you think about it, we're constantly regenerating our body, constantly regenerating ourselves. And depending on what you talk to, some people say that all your cells are replaced every year. Some are saying, you know, all your atoms and molecules are replaced every 7 years. I don't know the exact number, but just think of your skin, think of your gut, you know, all that's being replaced all the time. And so we are born with what's called adult stem cells. And these stem cells, they're basically undifferentiated cells. And they have a capacity to divide. And they keep on dividing and dividing and dividing until at some point, I guess the telomere is just so short or gone that they stop dividing. But in essence, you know, they can divide forever. So once a stem cell divides, it happens in what's really called a symmetric fashion. It divides into two other stem cells. Now, what actually then happens is that these stem cells, they're maintained in what's called a niche. And that niche is actually another cell, which is called a pericyte. So it kind of protects those stem cells in that little area. But once one of those stem cells gets out of that niche, then it becomes what's called a progenitor cell. So now it's going to begin to differentiate into a variety of different cells. Now, depending on where that stem cell is, it can only differentiate into a very limited number of cells. So it's not like you can take one of those cells and create a whole organism again. It doesn't happen then. So the idea then is that these cells develop in response to the environment that's around them. So it's no different than when you go to a party and you sort of gravitate to certain people and you move away from others, right? Well, the cells respond in a similar fashion. So they're going to respond and deliver what's needed. So if there's a loss of cells or the scar tissue, or there's loss of tissue oxygenation, then these cells will start forming new blood vessels or capillaries so that it can bring more blood supply and tissue oxygenation. So the idea then is that over time, the whole aging process, we start losing the ability for regeneration. And we see that oftentimes, for example, easiest in the face. When you look at the face, from a baby to an older person, there's some dramatic changes. And so it's really the quality of the skin, that really changes as well. And so I mentioned earlier, as an example with microneedling, basically with microneedling, what I do is I introduce these little micro channels into the skin, cause irritation, cause inflammation, excite the cells so they start rejuvenating. And so what happens, you build collagen through this process, you build elastin, there's an improved, blood supply, all these things because those areas are stimulated. Now, in addition to that, by introducing different growth factors, then that further enhances that healing aspect. And then your face, miraculously looks a lot better, in a couple of weeks. It looks rejuvenated, and it looks clean. So in any kind of disease process, typically we're dealing with a variety of different things. One is inflammation, another is immune response. I'll talk a little bit more about the immune response, but another is poor tissue oxygenation, scarring, loss of cells, and then infection, microorganisms. So when we introduce cell therapy, it has the potential to affect all of that. So it has this potential to reduce the inflammation, affect the immune response. And we saw that, for example, with COVID. There are many trials out there that, patients, were given cell therapy, and within days, if not weeks, had incredible, recoveries from all of that. In essence, I think, what our president is currently undergoing is something similar. I don't know exactly, what Remdesivir is, but it's still within that realm. It's affecting the immune response. And so by addressing the underlying pathologies, then we can, that's basically what regenerative medicine is addressing those underlying pathologies with cell therapy and reversing inflammation, and stopping inflammation, reducing immune response. Take lupus as an example. I mean, that's an immune response, going crazy. And so when we can stop that, not with drugs, which have all the complications with that as well, that's in essence what regenerative therapy is. So just to say it differently, it is molecular biology, tissue engineering, gene mapping, as well as understanding how gene therapy can work. What's cool about it, regenerative medicine too, is that we can create models to study different types of drugs and how cells respond based on those drugs. We can create, cells to produce insulin and then implant that into the tissue so that people no longer need insulin injections. I mean, all of this are things that I'm addressing in my program, with scientific, peer-reviewed papers, addressing all of it.
And this is so exciting. If one good thing came out of COVID is that it was able to kind of slow you down and speed you up all at the same time. But to get you in a place where you were able to work on that program, Dr. Rademaker, because you're a worldwide traveler, you're high demand, everybody wants you. And finally, you were able to focus in on that program. So many people want to go to that cellular level. They want to better understand what's behind the MLD we do, and some of the other practitioners who have more scope of practice. they still want to know this information that we didn't get when we were in school. You're right. You have to go to another whole level to get that information. But when you see the evidence-based outcomes, you can't help but say, I want to learn more. This is what I got into this for, to see people get better and not stay sick and have a hope that we can take steps backwards when disease the same, let's move forward. And you've been doing that. Guys, I know it sounds like I'm blowing his horn, but I'm not. He's a mover and shaker. Some of the things he's talking about tonight, he was doing. I saw him doing it 10 years ago before anybody else was doing it in the country. I saw him doing self-fill before anybody else knew what the word was.
Right.
So we thank you for being that face out there in the front. And not only that, but really coordinating that with the Board of Plastic Surgery, which is one other thing I wanted to talk about for a minute. I've heard from other surgeons throughout the country, and I know I heard it from you. The Board of Plastic Surgery seems to be getting more requests for this type of medicine above and beyond just what was traditional cutting from 15, 20 years ago. They're saying there's more evidence now, there's methodology that we can apply to help facial enhancement, rejuvenate your body, your mind, your soul, and all of that. And it's more than just a knife. So Dr. Rademaker, I'm gonna let you run with the ball on that.
Well, it's interesting because when you think about it from this perspective, and whatever your religious beliefs are or not, it really comes down to what's called first principles. And this was actually coined by, I think it was Aristotle 2,000 years ago. And it's the fact that, when you look at the basic of everything, the basis of everything. And so when no other explanation is possible. And so when we look at ourselves, I mean, a billion years ago, the mitochondrion, which is the battery or the engine in our body, in our cells, that kind of was incorporated in the cell a billion years ago. And so what we need to do is we need to understand that we've developed over thousands of years. And agriculture wasn't introduced until about 10,000 years ago. And so, and some people say that was the origin of modern disease, because we started modifying things. And so the point that I'm getting at is quite simply this, is that, first principles looks at, when everything, if you move everything else away, this is what we need to be doing. And so one is moving around, because people aren't moving around anymore, right? The lymphatic, drainage isn't happening as well as it used to. And because of that, then that's how we get disease. The kinds of foods that we eat today. I mean, most people are eating only processed foods, right? So how bad is that? That's just, fully intoxicating your body with all sorts of junk. So again, whenever we're working with our patients, we're going to want to consider all the different elements of, how we've evolved over thousands of years, because you can't argue with evolution. You can't. So, and interestingly enough, some people are from the theory that, we weren't fully optimized even before then. And so now we can become even more optimized. And so, lymphatic drainage is an integral part of that, how it detoxifies the body. But what else can you help people understand? Drinking water, as an example, that's huge. The kinds of fats that you eat, that's huge. How you sleep at night, that's huge. And as Lisa was just mentioning, which is great insight because I didn't know about this, but we do need 8 hours of sleep every single night. And so if you don't get your adequate sleep, then the lymphatic drainage isn't going to happen as effectively to allow the brain, as an example, to heal itself, to repair and regenerate. So getting back and helping your clients and you guys yourself, making sure that you eat well, you sleep well, you exercise well, and all these things. And then the idea that I believe in, and this is a lot of the work that I do, is, giving people more value than they're just asking for, because it doesn't take a lot of effort to add just a little more that really rocks somebody's world. And because most other people aren't doing that. So if you can distinguish yourself by giving others, some more ideas, what they can do, or potentially even referring people. I have no problems referring people out if I know it's going to help them. And one of the things that I'm doing in my own program is actually teaching doctors, and Lisa and I are going to put something together for you guys as well, where, you know, part of your success depends on your mindset. How's it that you're approaching your own self, your life, your relationships, your goals, your dreams, all that, but also from a business perspective. What are the different things that you don't know would make a huge difference in business, and helping you with different types of resources, but then ultimately actually creating a community of people where we can, converse and corroborate and collaborate to help everyone. And which is one of the reasons I have my website. I'm just tweaking it, by the way. So if you're already logged in, there's some things that I still have to fix on it. But it's called mylocalwellness.com, and it's really the idea is to connect the consumer with you, so that you have more people, in your business, and you're helping more as well. And of course, it's all free. So yeah, there's so many things that, as practitioners of wellness, because that's what I consider myself, of wellness and transformation. Um, it's really not that hard to do really, really well. You just have to get back to first principles and just add more value.
And you did, Dr. Rademaker. In fact, I'm looking at your screen behind you. You have, you're on Facebook and you have a show, Prescription for Your Transformation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And could you tell them about this? Guys, I'm going to highly recommend this because Dr. Rademaker's right. Do I have all the answers? No, all of us together bring answers. And he has a free show that I would highly recommend that you see, because he's got different guests on all the time that could answer some of the questions that sometimes you send me. And Dr. Rademaker, tell them about your show.
Well, actually, I'm reinventing my show. So I've been doing this for about 5 years,
Okay.
and I would say in the last 5 years I'm an amateur. Um, as I've been trying to figure out my photography, my filming, and all that kind of stuff, and editing, and I do everything myself, by the way. But normally, what I would do is an hour show every Thursday night, starting about 7 o'clock. I work with a radio station out in Phoenix, Arizona, and so it's a live radio show, as well as I multi-stream it on 3 different Facebook pages and YouTube, my website, and then Crowdcast as well. And quite frankly, I don't know anybody who's doing it like that, so I feel pretty cool about that. But the point is that I interview all sorts of people, and you know, did I interview you, Lisa? I forget.
You didn't. We were going to, but
Right.
we will do it. But I love to when you have a chance.
Yeah, I don't know why we never did. Well, now it's going to be a lot easier because it's an hour show, and I would interview coaches and doctors and artists. And the last show that I just did was a beautiful artist, beautiful earth angel, who was part of the Goodness Tour. And if you really want to get excited about something, check out the Goodness Tour. And he's bringing art to all these places that have been devastated, and after hurricanes and all sorts of bad things happening. And um, and then other experts or professionals in different areas. That, and my purpose is, again, it's what we don't know that makes all the difference. I mean, what Socrates was saying, in the beginning of wisdom is ignorance, or ignorance is the beginning of wisdom. You're figuring out what you don't know so that you then begin to learn what you need to know. And so that's the whole premise of the show, to help people get access to this, but through authentic conversations, no BS. I mean, that's the big challenge to today's world, with everything that's filtered and manipulated and censored and all that nonsense. It's hard to figure out, what's real and what's not. So when you can actually watch someone talk, then you can tell if they're authentic or not. or for that matter, if you resonate with them or not. And so that's the whole purpose of the show. And I'm reformatting it where it's no longer going to be an hour long. It's actually going to be 15 minutes. And I'm going to do that 3 times a week. And so I've been recording quite a bit. And so 50 minutes about all sorts of different things, whether it's finance, whether it's medicine, whether it's coaching. And then I'll talk to Lisa. We'll figure out the time that I get to interview her. And we just talk about different things. And, you know, the, the internet is such a wonderful medium to get good information. You just have to know where to go.
Exactly. And I tell you guys, I can't speak highly enough of all the guests he brings on. It's just amazing. It's like watching an Oprah show, but better, because you get to be interacting with Dr. Rademaker, and I just love all his guests. They have something of value to add to your practice. And like you said, you got to have the connectivity. A lot of people ask me, how do you build your community in your practice? Well, it comes from events like this, going the extra mile to reach out to those people and knowing where they are. And Dr. Rademaker has such a wonderful resource. In fact, Dr. Rademaker, this will be my last question so we can let others ask.
Right.
What can a therapist, they always ask me, what can a therapist do to be able to reach out to other doctors like you? What should they do and what should they not do? What's your word of recommendation?
So, well, it's understanding, you know, what the problem is of these practices. And so, number one, they're overworked, overwhelmed. They don't have the time, and they're approached by so many people who supposedly have answers. So probably the best thing is if you can just simply deliver a one pager with some very specific scientific references, and I like the one that Lisa just added, and and some very specific, you know, results that can happen with this, and then just leaving it open and say, look, you know what, love to, you know, offer this to you for tryout, offer this for your patients, make references to what Lisa just made, you know, the American Society of Plastic Surgery, you know, or I mean, I'm sure Cleveland Clinic has something. You know, just if you can mention one or two of those things, and not a long drawn out, you know, overview of stuff, but just very succinctly, look, this actually works. Here's the proof. Love to offer this, and then leave it at that. And hopefully, what will happen is that somebody will look at it and address it. Now the thing is that you can't just leave it there and walk away and hope something will happen. You know, you have to dog it a little bit. You have to kind of, you know, go back and ask or call and say, did you have a chance to read it? Do you have any questions? Just being really nice about it. And, you know, but having this humility and just being open and says, you know, what can I do to help you? But also coming from the point of finding out what their problems are. And so when you're focused on just simply adding value, forget about what you're going to get out of it. But your focus is really to add value. And that's the marketing mantra today. It's not, okay, what I'm going to get out. No, forget that. Put that aside. Add value, add value, add value, and then you will, you know, get a response.
Dr. Rademaker, that was what I did in South Florida when Dr. Lerner had his heart attack. I just made, I would go in 9 o'clock in the morning at the offices. I wouldn't speak to the doctor. I would just bring a piece of research, a before and after, my business card, and say, hey, when they have a chance to look at that, would you like me to come in and in service for a half hour at lunch? I'll bring them lunch. You let me know what works for you. With the thought in mind, if they saw those pictures, they could relate to probably patients they had that were like that, saying, let me help you with this problem. I know you have this problem on your caseload, and this is what I do. And I think that's right. I wasn't going in for money. I really wasn't. I was like, can I help you with the one tool that I have? And it opened many doors, just the way you said it.
But I don't know about buying lunch though. That gets kind of expensive.
Yeah, if we're all eating at that real big place with all the swanky food in there, it does. But it was really nice to open the door, having the research and the photos, because you're right. The doctors don't want us coming into their office for 2 hours, teaching them anatomy with great big books and presentations. They have zero time for that.
No, look at mine. I mean, we barely spoke, right, at first, and you gave me a result, and that's what mattered.
So, hey, Doc, I think you got like at least half a dozen therapists here that would like to work on you. Hey, and by the way, I can do some deep tissue. I can do Japanese shiatsu, stand on your back. So, my friends, I'm going to open up the mic here. Do some of you have some questions for Dr. Rademaker that you'd like to ask him? I'm going to check the chat because I think, I do. I have a question from Mary. She says, I have a client with complex regional pain syndrome, which I believe is more of a neurological disorder. Would MLD benefit those with CRPS?
You know, the answer is categorically, MLD is always going to help. You know, I like to qualify my job in two ways. And the first job priority that I have is managing expectations. When I can manage expectations, let people know what to expect, then I'm off the hook. And the other one is just dodging bullets. And what I mean by that, you know, either having absolutely no results or really bad ones. And so when you do that and explain to people, but these complicated situations, especially the neurological ones, they're so multifactorial. And so unless you reach a certain threshold, and what I mean by that is that let's take Alzheimer's as a great example, with 36 different parts that we know of today that contribute to Alzheimer's. So you have to begin to address at least 50% of those, if not more, to hit a threshold so that you begin to reverse the condition. Now, with the one that you mentioned, I don't know what that is. But it may be worthwhile to start looking into some of these conditions as to what's contributing to them, what kind of vitamin deficiencies are involved, you know, what other